an abstract, more beautiful, more complex way to tell you. On top of the fact that, and maybe you don't like the message, but they're telling you something.
It's poetic and it's stunning and it's a language that they're familiar with. It's a vernacular that fits their background, and we talked about that with the blues series that you did. And quite frankly, it's no different than Malcolm X choosing Alex Haley to write his biography. They know that people will listen to it. They know that rap is the largest and continuously largest growing form of music. They're now recording rap is growing roots in Russia and in Korea, and there's a reason, because people in Russia, youth in Korea, both North and South, they know how rap came about. They know that it was protesting the government and what was happening in areas like you mentioned that people wanted to ignore or people didn't want to pay attention to. And so
That's
they see it as this voice and this place to use it in. So I use a lot of music.
In one sense, you're sort of on the front lines of young people who are dealing, you've eloquently put it together for us. They're dealing with these very existential problems, which have been problems for a long time. It's just that they're increasingly becoming impossible to ignore. They, and for them, they're dealing, we'll be old people and the world's going to be burning, and then they're still going to be here.
Yeah.
So, I wonder, a part of me says, I'm a fighter, so I want to fight to make this better now. And I'm going to continue to do that in my own way. But I wonder if in one sense, we're going to be okay. Because whenever I talk to young people in the different ways that I get to have access to them now, I feel like we're going to be all right. If just if the older folks would just go away somewhere. I don't want to say if all the old people would just pass on, but if
we are so going to be okay, because
we're in the way.
So look at it this way. For example, our binary political system is on the edge of a cliff, because you have a group of young people who, this crap of binary gender and this idea of like, this is what men do and look and act like, and this is what women do and act and look like.
Everything like, well-defined and predictable, so that we all know our place.
No, they're done with that. They don't. Yeah. Even if they don't, even kids who are not transgender, kids who are not gender fluid, they also, for the most part, there's certainly exceptions out there, but and certainly I think the Northeast is, and Connecticut, but at least in my world where I am, my kids either have a very strong voice and support it, or they just don't care what someone else is doing. They don't like having to choose one lane or the other. They want to have this ability to move and shift. They don't want, like, okay, I happen to be gay, but that's not my whole identity. Right. I'm also a musician, and I'm also a poet.
You hear that from younger folks a lot.
Yep.
There's no doubt I am this, but I'm also this.
I'm also these 5 things.
And you don't get to define me. Which I find like, isn't that supposed to be, I mean, what America or the United States is, we're all these different narratives, historically and currently. Mm-hmm. But isn't one of our biggest strengths supposed to be, you can come here from anywhere, and then you become whatever the hell you want to be. And who the hell can tell you that you can't be that?
That's, well,
I mean, that's supposed to be
people,
what it's about, isn't it?
But that's what it's supposed to be. Unfortunately, and you mentioned it earlier, like this class, like we want people to stay in their box. Like we want to say you can come this far.
There are some of us that if they do not have that orderliness, I mean, we've seen it all this year.
Yep.
Writ large in a more street level way than we have in subsequent decades, but we saw it 50, 60 years ago too. Sometimes people are, and this always happens when we're close to elemental change forever. You get to the 11th hour of that, and it's already happened.
Oh goodness, yes. Right? We're having,
but the establishment, there are people who are so into the status quo, yep. They are going to fight tooth and nail down to the last man and woman to keep things the way they were and keep people in their place, whatever that place is.
we're seeing our next round. I mean, this is George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and these events. They're the next round of Ruby Bridges
Oh
and
yeah.
Rose. And it's this idea of my students don't. They're so different from our generations. They talk about trauma. There's not this uncomfortable we say 1950s, but I mean, we had it too. Like, you just didn't talk, like whatever happened, whatever was bothering you, you just, and we had it in band a little bit, right? To that extent of like, whatever's bothering you, like you take it off, you leave it at the door, you don't deal with it. And
Right.
our thing was, like Mr. Garb would say, you pick it back up and deal with it later. But even then, no one really wanted to deal with it. No one really, like, no teacher really wanted to hear it. No teacher really wanted to sit and like let you have that conversation. Whereas now, my kids are very upfront. And I know people go, well, like, do they all have anxiety? Well, yeah, this year especially, yes, they do.
Right.
They actually all do.
You're welcome to a global health crisis. That's what's going to happen. This
That's
is existential. It doesn't go away, and it unemotionally attacks you if it wants to, and you don't know when it's
not. We all had anxiety. It's just that we didn't say anything about it. We didn't. Either we didn't know what it was, we didn't know how to shape it or form it or say anything about it, or we just didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't something that you talked about. It wasn't something that you shared. You just kept it all.
People saying like, well, we got over those things. Did we? Because all generations, including ours, Gen Xers, have high rates of alcoholism, high rates of divorce, high rates of different substance abuse. And
we figured out how to function at a certain level.
Yeah, and that's not living.
Getting over. That's not making peace with it. That's not finding a place where you're comfortable with it. That's just
not intellectualizing it.
Out, like, where to box it up.
Right.
I found the place in my body to put in a little box and just like tuck it in there and leave it there. And we'll just don't poke at it because it might explode.
Yeah. Which is like living on the edge of something. You know what I mean? It's latent energy, the way I see that. That energy could be used for so much more, and not just for society, but in the first and foremost for that person, for that individual. All individuals deserve inner peace. You can't always have inner peace, but you find ways to use all that energy inside of you and turn it into something positive. And if you're not busy building that, then it's negativity and it's holding that person back from happiness. Happiness isn't easiness. You know what I mean?
No. Oh God, no.
A meaningful life isn't always happy, but it's meaningful. And so the good and the bad is okay because it's soulful, because it's deep.
It feeds you. You learn from it. You grow from it. You feed on it. It makes you want to do more. It makes you want to learn more. They're more empathetic. They're more empathetic as a generation than I think any other generation I've ever seen. And it's not out of duty, because I think, and you and I did a lot of history projects together. I mean, I think sometimes too, this whole thing with the masks and everything, I think back to like World War I, World War II, where we decided to do the victory gardens, where we stopped using tin, where we stopped using silk because we needed it for parachutes, all these different things. I'm like, we were perfectly able to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And we did it because we believed in patriotism. We believed in the country. Now, I have a lot of kids who don't have that incredible patriotism, but they're genuinely empathetic. They feel bad and they want people to have a better life. They want people to have a better world. They read something like Beloved or To Kill a Mockingbird or Holden Caulfield. Why can't I think of it?
Oh, yeah. Catcher in the Rye.
Catcher in the Rye. And because to be honest, I remember reading Catcher in the Rye the first time through, and I was annoyed by Holden. I'm like, oh my God, dude, just get it together, like move on.
In 7th grade, that didn't speak to me.
No.
I mean, I was like, I don't get this kid, man. He's a spoiled brat. He went to private school. Why is he complaining?
My kids see him and they get right away that he's broken. Like, they understand that he's broken. And I'm like, wow, I didn't see that. I just saw someone who was annoying and couldn't get over it, couldn't just move on. Yeah, whereas they see him as broken, they understand him. And so they just do remarkable things. It's part of what caused me, going back to your original question, the course that I created is, it's called Women's Lit, which is a little bit misleading. Our sort of side term for it, our side title for it is called Women in Words, with men in parentheses. And our goal is to look at how women's identities in particular, it certainly hits on gender in general, but how women's identities in particular have been shaped through language, and shaped through writing over the course of, actually, we go all the way back to Simonides, who wrote a poem in 7th century BCE. So we're talking almost 8,000 years ago. And look at the fact that in his poem, women are still addressed as dogs and pigs and horses and bees, and that we still have that iconography, we still have those archetypes, we still have those stereotypes, we still have those tropes. And how over the course of time, women, either through like actual writing, through literature, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Amy Tan, or through other forms of art, through other forms of writing, whether in cooking and visual arts and leadership, how they've been able to rewrite the narrative and change those markings, change the way they're seen, and break away from a binary system, break away from a system where they're told what they should be and how they should be. And we have a blast with it. They for the first time, A, they're reading more women, B, they're not reading a bunch of dead white guys.
Right.
Which is that in and of itself. They're like, and we listen to music. We listen to Nina, and we listen to Beyonce, and we read from Isabel Allende, and all of a sudden kids see, I have kids from Cuba, and I have kids from Chile, and I have kids from, they're seeing their own culture, they're seeing it there, and they're seeing things that are familiar to them.
How uplifting that can be for some of them, that they're in America. You might be the first person in a formal setting they can instantly recognize somebody else here who's not Chilean, understands what happened with Allende, understands what happened when the junta took over Argentina. Like, somebody recognizes that this shit happened to us.
Yep. And I'm not an expert.
When we think of America, we think of America. We don't even think of Canada. Like, for those of us that have strong ties to Canada, we were brought up in a house where America is North America.
Yep.
There are two different countries, but we're the same people, basically. But most people don't have that.
No, they have a very, we even have an elevated level of which female writers are permissible, are allowable. And we certainly have, we have our Edith Whartons.
Give me some examples of that.
Your Sylvia Plaths and your Edith Whartons, and who are remarkable, and they're certainly worthy of studying. We do study them. But those voices of women who they had no place, like your Joy Harjo's. And so it becomes this thing of, for the first time, they hear their own voices or experiences. We read this essay by Gloria Anzaldúa, who was a queer writer. She has since passed, and she's Chicano, and one of her famous essays is called How to Tame a Wild Tongue. And she talks about everything from the perspective of, for example, and my kids get this. A lot of my kids have had to be the translators for their households. When you run across a kid that you're like, oh, you know what? Listen, they speak Spanish in the household. I need a Spanish translator. And you suddenly, for the first time in this essay, she speaks to the fact that, listen, there's 1,000 different versions of Spanish. So just because you have someone who speaks Spanish, it'd be like saying to someone, hey, listen, I know you're from Texas and I know they're from Rhode Island, but could you explain to me like what a cabinet is? Because you're both speaking English. And the person from Texas is like, well, cabinet is something you put up on the wall and I put stuff in. The person from Rhode Island's going, yeah, no, that's a drink. Like, that's our milkshake. And they're like, what the hell? What?
Right.
So
right.
Even so this idea of we go, oh, they're Spanish, versus there's 1,000 different versions of being Spanish and what that culture means. And to have an author who A, talks about that, who B, talks about the experience of being told repeatedly that, you need to control your language, you control your tongue, control the way you speak. Because so many of them have been through that. Either they've been through it directly, or they've watched family members be made fun of or be teased for the way they speak or the fact they have. And I tell my kids all the time, like, listen, the next time someone makes fun of you or someone you know for being bilingual and having an accent, just blow them a kiss and walk away, because they're literally a moron.
Right.
Just ask them to speak your language. That's the first thing you do, is ask them, say, okay, I'm speaking English and I know it's not great, it's not perfect, but I'm speaking your language. Now it's your turn. Speak, please. Speak some Portuguese to me.